This is creating a personal roadmap or annual review process. I'm going to go through each of the steps on this PDF, which is included in the course. The step one of creating a personal roadmap is reflecting on the previous year. So you want to look at, this is just a couple of minutes. You want to look at what went well in the past year and also things that didn't go well. Just maybe 5 minutes thinking about each of those two things and jot down some notes for yourself. After that, we will move on to step two. Step two is, now that you've thought about what went well this past year, to start thinking about this coming year and what you might be able to accomplish this year. This is not the realistic part. This is the brainstorm. Just write down everything you think you might want to do this year. Again, just a couple of minutes is fine. And the next piece is, of those goals that you came up with, or those potential goals, pick the most important three. What would you really, really like to accomplish for this year? And write those down right here. Step three is choosing categories for goals this year. This is not the same as those three important goals. This is actually just categories. What kinds of things are important to you to reach goals in? I put some examples here, and I will show you an example of my own current personal roadmap so that you can see what this looks like at the end. But potential categories: financial, professional, savings, health, learning, spiritual. Any kind of major area that's important to you, include that in here as one of your categories. I put 7 down. That's usually about how many I end up with, but you can have as many as makes sense to you, as long as you can keep track of them. After you pick your overarching goals, I want you to imagine what your ideal life is going to look like in 1 year. Considering that you've met all or most of these goals, or at least a realistic subset of them, think about what your life is going to look like in 1 year if you meet all of these. What's your work going to look like? What's your social life going to look like? This part is more realistic. You should definitely make it something that is reachable, but you should have to reach for it. So take some notes about your ideal life right here. Moving on to step 5. Now that you've chosen your categories, I want you to pick a couple of goals that are actually measurable inside that category. So for example, if languages is one of your categories, like it is for me, you don't want to put just learn Spanish as goal number 1, because that's very, very difficult to use. It's not something that you can work toward easily, and you can't tell whether you've finished it or not. It needs to be something that you can measure. So I used learn enough Spanish to have a conversation with a native for 5 minutes without using a dictionary. So pick a couple of goals for each of your categories and make them measurable. Now that you have these goals within the major goals within your categories, I want you to break them down into quarterly goals. So what that means is, so even learn enough Spanish in 5 minutes to learn enough Spanish to have a conversation for 5 minutes without a dictionary is quite a large goal. So you want to break that up into 4 different goals, mini goals, so that your 4th goal would be that final enough Spanish to have a conversation for 5 minutes. So for each of those goals, I want you to come up with quarter goals. And I want you to be specific about when those quarter goals are due. So for example, I did mine this year actually on the January, April, July, October. So my quarter 1 goals were due on March 1st. So whatever makes sense for you, you can put here, and put your quarter goals for each of your 7 categories. Next, you want to actually get started on what will be the first steps for right now. So quarter number 1 is where we are right now. So even those quarter goals, it can be quite a bit to look at or think about. So I want you to break it down into something that you could do right now. For each of those category and the smaller goals, what could you do in the next couple of seconds or minutes at most to get started on this? After that, step 8 is taking action on those first steps. So of those immediate actions that you just created, I want you to pick 3 of them that are the shortest and easiest that you have the least resistance to. So these should be just 10-15 seconds, no more than a minute. And I want you to do them right now. So if you're following instructions, this should take 3 minutes or less, and I want you to go for it right now. I'll wait. All right, so once you do those 3 actions, what was the outcome? That's what I actually want you to document here is when you did action number 1, what happened? Did you feel like you were getting something done? Did you feel like you were going somewhere, or did it just feel like I'm making you do busy work? Just jot down what outcome was for you, either feeling wise or what happened based on doing that action. Step 9 is now that you have a little bit of inertia, hopefully you felt something from completing at least one of those small goals, if not all 3. I want you to pick 3 of the immediate actions that you came up with in step 7 as the ones related to your most important goals that you chose in step 2. So go back and look at step 2 for the most important goals. Let me scroll up there for a second. So these ones right here, what are your most important goals? I want you to look at those, key goal 1, 2, and 3, and then come back down to step 9 and use those to decide which immediate actions to do. Now those can be a little bit longer than a couple of seconds, but still they should not take more than 10 or 15 minutes. I want you to do all 3 of those right now. This should take up to 45 minutes. If you can't do it right now, I want you to do it today. Then I want you to write down what was the outcome of taking each of these 3 actions. Did you get somewhere? Do you feel like you've got some movement going on your goal? Does it feel good? Or again, does it just feel like it's not really getting you anywhere? So step 10 is, so many goals will require something besides just time or energy. Sometimes you have to buy something or have to sign up for a subscription for something, or you need to get some help from somebody else before you can do it. This is the step where you actually plan what those resources are that are required for each major category, as well as how you're going to get them. So the first thing to write down is the resources that your goals require. You can just put not applicable if they don't require anything other than your time and energy. After you put together what the resources are that are required, the next step, part of this step, is how are you going to gather those resources for each of the categories. And finally, you're going to implement your personal roadmap. Now that you have completed the pieces of it, I want you to put it into a format that's readable, usable, meaningful to you. I'll show you mine in just a second. You are free to copy that design if it works for you. If it doesn't, feel free to make it whatever makes sense to you. After you organize it into something that makes sense to you, I want you to share it with somebody who can provide some feedback on it to see if your goals make sense to them based on their understanding of you. After you've shared it with somebody and maybe made a couple of tweaks on it, the next step is to keep it somewhere where you'll notice it. So I'm going to move this to the side. I actually keep this right here on the, it's currently May 18th, so I have it set up. I update the current version each month. So this is my May life roadmap, and that's where I normally keep it. So usually I recommend you spend just a couple of minutes. I usually spend 10 minutes or less at the beginning of each month to look at it. And then every quarter I look at to see if I've made my quarter goals or not. I recommend that you do the same. All right, so that's it for the roadmap. I'm going to make a couple of comments about common objections or questions about it, and then I'm going to show you my roadmap. So people often ask me, why is this roadmap so important? They ask why I'm making such a big deal about it. I will tell you honestly that this particular activity, I did it based on recommendations from a couple of different individuals and courses that I took, and I found that it was what got me the furthest, the fastest, and with the least amount of energy put in by myself. Having a plan, even if you don't end up sticking to it, is the most valuable thing I have found in hacking my life. Number two is I don't like to plan things, so things change so much it seems like a pointless waste of time. So I actually felt this way too before I did this. I kind of complained about it to myself until the third course in a row, or the third, I don't remember if it was a course or a blog, but the third source that I found about hacking my life and supercharging things that said you absolutely must make a annual roadmap. I finally broke down and did it. And when I did, I found out that the amount of hacking energy that I got out of it was absolutely incredible for a very small amount of effort. So yes, things do change, but they change in such a way that as long as you have a plan that you are working toward, you will either you will get close to your goals or you will get something different to it. And if you don't set something that you're walking toward, you are much less likely to get anything that you want. Number three is, what if I don't like my plan? Well, that one always kind of amuses me, but I hear it quite a bit. If you don't like your plan, please change it. These are just guidelines. Use this however makes sense and you see fit. Also, if you don't like it, you can start over from scratch and completely do it again. But normally you just delete the things that you don't like, or have another think about what your goals and your values are, because you may not have gotten a good idea on it based on that first kind of session that you did with deciding what your most important goals were. All right, I'm going to go ahead now and show you my personal roadmap.